Frontline assessment. Putin's Gambit and the invisible countermove, the secret doctrine that is stopping Russia. Good evening. We are analyzing a critical, fluid 48-hour sequence that has fundamentally recalibrated the immediate calculus of the Ukraine war. This is not a simple news cycle. It is a dense, multi-layered event that functions as a masterclass in modern geopolitical signaling, coercive diplomacy, and asymmetric warfare doctrine, what US and NATO intelligence agencies had long. Wargame's sudden, high-order Russian escalation outside established patterns has now materialized. It unfolded not in a slow, diplomatic crescendo, but in a sharp, tactical shock, revealing the brittle nerves and deep strategies of all involved actors. We begin with the precipitating action, a dangerous and deliberately ambiguous escalation by Vladimir Putin. For nearly 2 years, his war of aggression has followed a discernible, if brutal, pattern rhythm of grinding artillery barrages, incremental territorial pushes, and cyclical missile campaigns. Analysts could chart its ebbs and flows. The true alarm in Washington and Brussels this week was triggered not by a new movement, but by the cessation of the old ones. The standard indicators that Western intelligence monitors the movement of Iskander mobile launch platforms, the forward deployment of Tu-95 and Tu-160 strategic bombers to Arctic bases, encrypted communication spikes among general staff units, and the sudden pullback of diplomatic personnel all fell silent. In the grim, experience-hardened lexicon of Kremlinology and military analysis, a Putin silence is almost always the prelude to a violent noise. That silence broke definitively in the pre-dawn hours. Pentagon and NATO officials confirmed the detection of what they termed a significant and non-routine strategic repositioning of Russian forces, both within occupied Ukraine and from deep inside Russian territory. This involved the activation and deployment of weapon systems that had been in reserve or deep maintenance for over 18 months. We are discussing platforms like the Advanced Electronic Warfare Complex Krasuka-4, designed to blind satellites and aircraft, and increased alert status for units operating the 9M730 Burevestnik nuclear-capable cruise missile assets, not used for frontline slogging. Their mobilization is never incidental. It is a deliberate high-stakes signal in a geopolitical language everyone in the room understands. Historically, such moves serve one of three purposes: tangible preparation for a major offensive operation, a blunt instrument of intimidation to force concessions, or a calibrated probe to test an adversary's red lines and response time. The chilling ambiguity for analysts tonight is determining which category this falls into, the more dangerous possibility that it encompasses all three simultaneously, a layered strategy of intimidation and preparation. This deliberate ambiguity forced a cascade of emergency meetings in Washington, London, and Berlin, culminating in an urgent, deliberately non-routine public warning from the White House National Security Council. The language was meticulously stark and escalatory in its own right. Putin's actions were deemed reckless, destabilizing, and most significantly, inconsistent with any path toward de-escalation. In the nuanced code of great power diplomacy, this is not a statement of concern. It is a direct public accusation and a drawn line. It translates to, "We have identified your maneuver, we interpret it as crossing an established threshold, and we are formally signaling that we are prepared to respond." It is an echo of Cold War-era crisis communication, designed to prevent fatal miscalculation by stating consequences clearly before actions are taken. Yet, the fundamental theory of coercive diplomacy holds that intimidation only succeeds if the target hesitates, if it seeds doubt, and paralyzes response. Ukraine's leadership, from President Zelensky down to the military command in Kiev, demonstrated a masterful understanding of this principle. They provided the object lesson in how to counter it: decisive, preemptive action. Within a remarkably compressed 6-hour window of detecting the Russian strategic shift, Ukrainian forces likely coordinating across the SBU security service, military intelligence, GUR, and deep strike units of the armed forces launched a coordinated multi-domain counter-escalation. This was not a local counter-attack or defensive barrage. Ukrainian military sources have confirmed a series of precision strikes targeting the very architecture of Russia's potential escalation. They hit a major logistics hub in occupied Luhansk, recently reinforced with ammunition and engineering assets that analysts believed were pre-positioned for a renewed offensive push. They struck fuel depots in Donetsk and Crimea, critical for sustaining any large-scale armored movement. They destroyed ammunition storage facilities in Kherson region, and most critically, disabled key communication centers used by Russian southern and central military district commands. In tactical terms, they did not aim at the muscle of the Russian army's frontline troops, but at its nervous system and its fuel lines, the command, control, communications, and logistics (C3L) nodes. This is the essence of a strategic denial operation. They struck not in retaliation for an IATAO attack, but to preemptively degrade the capacity to launch one, seeking to raise the cost of escalation to a prohibitive level before the first new Russian tank column could roll forward. The speed and precision of this response are its most analytically significant features. A 6-hour decision-to-action cycle indicates several critical advantages held by Kiev: exquisite, real-time intelligence, likely fused from satellite, electronic, and human sources, a testament to deep NATO-Ukraine; intelligence integration, a decentralized command structure that empowers frontline commanders and special operations units to execute complex plans without waiting for lengthy political approvals; and a mature, battle-hardened understanding of Russian military vulnerabilities. This operational tempo disrupts what the famed American military strategist Colonel John Boyd termed the OODA Loop, the cycle of observe, orient, decide, and act. Ukraine observed the Russian repositioning, oriented to its strategic intent, decided on a disruptive response, and acted before Russian forces could complete their own OODA Loop and disperse or protect those critical assets. It is a demonstration of decision cycle superiority, a concept more often discussed in theory than seen executed with such clarity on a modern battlefield. This kinetic reply fundamentally transforms the geopolitical narrative of the week. Western intelligence assessments, shared with allies, now strongly suggest Putin's primary intent was a deliberate, high-stakes test-a-probe of Ukrainian will and Western political cohesion. It was classic coercive signaling, an attempt to project overwhelming force and menacing intent to induce panic, hesitation, or political fractures in the supporting coalition, particularly during a period of perceived political uncertainty in Washington. Ukraine's answer, backed by the immediate and firm White House warning, was a unified rejection of that coercion. They proved tangibly that escalation carries immediate, painful, and asymmetric costs. The strikes were so surgically timed that initial reports indicate Russian logistics convoys were halted in place, command posts went off the air, and the planned consolidation of forces was thrown into disarray. This forces not just a tactical pause, but a strategic reassessment in Moscow. To understand why this moment is so volatile, one must examine Putin's decision-making context. He is not acting from a position of unassailable strength, but from one of extraordinary and compounding internal pressure. The Russian political-military ecosystem is fraught with conflicting demands. Hardline Siloviki and nationalist factions demand total commitment to a decisive victory, regardless of cost. Pragmatic factions within the state and intelligence services see a quagmire and seek a negotiated exit to preserve regime stability. Oligarchs, their assets frozen and international access severed, desperately crave sanctions relief, and military commanders on the ground are demanding more troops, more ammunition, and more advanced equipment than Russia's strained industrial base can provide. Putin is the precarious balance of these irreconcilable interests, while managing a war that has consumed more human capital, material, and political prestige than anyone in the Kremlin initially projected. A leader in this position is inherently risk-prone. Bold, external gambits can be a tool to unify disparate internal factions, to shock the system, or to create a diversion from domestic failures. His simultaneous activation of cyber attacks against Ukrainian critical infrastructure, the amplification of tactical nuclear rhetoric on state television channels like Rossiya 1, and the reduction of official diplomatic communications with Western capitals, all within the same 48-hour window point, not to an isolated military adjustment, but to a coordinated, multi-vector pressure campaign. It is an attempt to weaponize uncertainty across all domains: military, digital, psychological, and diplomatic. Tonight, the immediate outcome appears to be a forced and tense recalculation in Moscow. The Kremlin's public response has been muted a silence that is itself deeply analytical. This is the sound of the Russian security apparatus weighing its next move after a costly gambit failed to achieve its primary psychological objective. Ukraine's President Zelensky framed the moment with potent clarity in his brief defiant national address. "We will not be intimidated by threats. Every escalation will be met with resolve. Ukraine fights not for territory alone, but for the right to exist." This is far from mere wartime rhetoric. It is the foundational, mobilizing doctrine of a nation engaged in what it perceives as a civilizational, existential struggle for survival. It is a direct appeal to the historical memory of national resistance, designed to solidify domestic unity and reinforce the moral imperative for continued Western support. The White House's urgent warning served multiple crucial functions in this intricate dance. It provided immediate political top cover for Ukraine's proactive response. It aligned the messaging of key Western capitals to present a united front. It reinforced the deterrence posture of NATO by explicitly naming the Russian action as beyond the pale. And it validated Ukraine's agency as a sovereign actor, not merely a client state. It was a careful blend of diplomatic, condemnation, and strategic enablement. The next 72 to 96 hours will be critically diagnostic. If Putin, faced with this demonstrated resolve and the tangible degradation of his escalation posture, chooses to de-escalate by standing down the activated units, returning to previous positions, or re-engaging diplomatically, this episode will be recorded in the intelligence postmortems as a failed and costly bluff. However, if he perceives the response as an unacceptable humiliation or a green light for further Western involvement, he may feel compelled to double down, potentially launching the very offensive these movements may have presaged, albeit from a weakened logistical position. In that scenario, the response template has now been unequivocally set. Ukraine has shown it will not break, will not wait for permission, and will retaliate against escalatory preparations with precision. The West, through the White House statement, has signaled for now that it will not abandon Kyiv at a moment of heightened crisis. In final analysis, what we witnessed was a high-speed, high-stakes exchange of strategic messages written not in diplomatic cables, but in the movement of armies and the impact of precision-guided munitions. Putin signaled latent capability and menacing intent. The West, through Washington, signaled unity and defined red lines. Ukraine signaled devastating resolve, tactical brilliance, and a new doctrine of active, preemptive strategic denial. The world is now fixed on the Kremlin's next move, watching for the slightest tremor in its state media narrative or military posture. Tonight, for the first time in weeks, the strategic initiative was seized not by the aggressor, but decisively and boldly by the defender. This story remains on a knife's edge, far from its conclusion, but one pivotal lesson has been rendered with crystal clarity. In the face of a calculated, dangerous escalation, hesitation, the very outcome Putin's maneuver sought to induce, was the one option unanimously and conclusively rejected by Kyiv and by those standing with it. The cost of escalation has just been visibly and painfully recalculated in real time. If you want to keep getting the news the Kremlin is trying to hide, if you believe the truth can't wait, then don't leave just yet. Click subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single update, because when silence comes from Moscow, the world needs to hear from us even louder. Thank you for being here. See you in the next alert.